All right, here I am. I think we're ready to go. I got to turn off my music real quick and get this podcast going because I'm under tight constraints today, time-wise. But hello, this is David McDonnell and Random Thoughts from County Antrim on this, the 7th day of February 2021. And as you all know, this is Super Bowl Sunday. And this podcast starts, or the game, I should say, starts as soon as the podcast is over. The NFL called me and we coordinated our efforts so that at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, when this podcast ends, the Super Bowl will begin. Now, I know there's some dumb people out there who are watching some ex-football players blabber about the game, even though they don't have a clue what's going on, and that's what happens in the half hour before the game actually starts. But the smart folks are watching this podcast, and then they'll watch the game live. And I hope you're watching this at home with your family and close friends. Dr. Fauci reminded us against watching this at big Super Bowl parties. He's afraid that the Super Bowl might become another super spreader event. The experts were right about a lot of these super spreader events. Trump rallies and Sturgis motorcycle rallies in South Dakota. And as predicted, the holidays, Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July, as well as family gatherings, Thanksgiving and Christmas, have all turned into maybe not super spreader events, but certainly mini spreader events. And it's kind of amazing to me that the Super Bowl Sunday kind of ranks up there now with Christmas and Thanksgiving. And I'm old enough to remember before there was such a thing as the Super Bowl. It was just the NFL championship game in December when the Eastern Division champ played the Western Division champ. And some bright fellow, which is my sarcastic way of saying moron, thought it'd be a good idea to call it the Super Bowl and give them numbers, Roman numerals. And I guess that was easy when there was only a few Roman numerals. Now it's quite complicated when they try to put a number to the Super Bowl. And I guess it's maybe a sneaky way to try to teach Americans how to count using Roman numerals. Now, I looked this up. Last year, there were 99.9 million people watched the Super Bowl worldwide on live television. Now, I don't know. There'll probably be that many tonight. I don't think that many people are going to be watching this podcast. But if I get a fraction of that, just a wee bit of that number, 1%. If I get 1% of that audience, that means I'll have almost 1 million people watching this podcast tonight, and I'd be pleased. Because, in part, the reason I'd be pleased, the numbers would be nice, but I also wanted to make an announcement. And I want you all to go out and get your calendar and write this day down. Sunday, March 14th. That's the Sunday before St. Patrick's Day. And we will have the first ever, and perhaps the first annual, Random Thoughts Story Swap. And I may even take a cue from the Super Bowl and call it Story Swap Roman numeral 1. Now, if you haven't participated in a story swap, they're just a lot of fun. It's just a group of people who get together and they take turns telling stories. There's a group here in County Antrim in northern Michigan who do this weekly during the summer. They gather around stones, which are in a circle, in a place they call the Stone Circle. And they take turns telling stories. It's a wonderful evening. Now, I'm a member of a group in Ireland called Storytellers of Ireland, and I believe I'm the only American member. And the organization had its annual meeting a few months back, and which of course the meeting was virtual. People in Ireland don't travel within the island much during the pandemic, and they certainly didn't want an American traveling to Ireland during the pandemic for the meeting. And I didn't take that personally. About the same time, as you may recall, actually it was just a month ago, Donald Trump, when he was still president, and on the eve of Joe Biden's inauguration, Trump planned a trip. He was going to fly to Scotland, play golf at his golf course in Scotland. He'd rather be in Scotland than be in America during the inauguration of Joe Biden. But Scotland said no. No one is allowed in Scotland from America unless it is on essential business. And of course, playing golf in Scotland is not essential business. So I didn't take it personally when the Irish didn't want me at the annual meeting. And the annual meeting was held thus, obviously, virtually. And it was a typical business meeting. Have you all been to those? You know, you read the minutes, you get the treasurer's report, you elect officers, and you do all the kinds of things you have to do at least once a year at any organization. As an aside note, the Storytellers of Ireland are in better financial shape now than they have ever been. And this is probably true of many, many organizations, because their revenue sources stayed the same. They're still getting dues, they're still getting some fundraising dollars, so they're still getting their ordinary amount of money, which isn't a lot, but whatever sources they normally get, they're still getting. On the revenue side, on the expense side, they have virtually no expenses. That's because during the pandemic, they can't do any programming. They can't conduct storytelling festivals or organize events or do all the kinds of things that they usually do. So they get the money coming in, but they don't have the money going out. And if we ever get this pandemic over with, they'll be ready to go. But once the business meeting was over, most of us stayed on Zoom where we had the meeting, and we did a story swap. And I told a story, and many of the other tellers did, and it was just wonderful listening to good storytellers tell stories. And I'm going to, in October, I'm going to be at the Taos Storytelling Festival, and I'm going to be judging a story swap. And there'll be many tellers there, some great tellers who are pros at this. But they do have one session for amateur tellers. And for some reason, they asked me to be the judge. And so I guess it's going to be some sort of contest. But I want to do a story swap on the Sunday before St. Patrick's Day. We'll call it the Random Thoughts Story Swap, Roman numeral 1. And I'll set up a video conference, and I'll be the host, and I'll make it easy for everyone to get on the conference. And of course, I have no clue how to do this, but that's my job from now till March 14th, is to figure it out. And give me some help if you can. And then I may tell a short story to get it started, and then I'm going to open it up to everybody to take turns. And I may put a limit of 5 minutes to a story, but it doesn't even have to be that long. It can be a 2-minute story. And it'll be a lot of fun, because I just love to hear stories that other people tell. And I think you'll enjoy the stories from many tellers. And I think you might enjoy telling a story. Be a teller yourself. What kind of stories are we interested in? It could be anything, about anything. If it interests you, it will probably interest someone else. And it does not have to be funny. It does not have to be profound. It doesn't have to bring a tear to the eye. It could be something quite mundane, but for whatever reason was interesting to you. I'll give you an example of that. I told a story a few months ago on this podcast. It wasn't even a story. It was just like 30 seconds in the midst of everything else I was talking about. And it was about my flu shot. What can be more mundane than your annual flu shot? But I just told about how I drove to our local middle school parking lot, got to a particular site, rolled down my window, stuck my arm out the window. Some guy came to the window, who I presume was a medical professional, but I didn't ask for credentials. Stuck out my arm, he stuck the needle, and boom, I had my flu shot. And since I was driving, I was at the driver's seat, so I stuck my left arm out the window. My wife was in the passenger seat, so she rolled down the right side window, stuck her right arm out the window, and she got her flu shot. That ain't much of a story, but I kind of made it into a story because, boom, it was just fascinating to me that that's what we do now, is stick our arms out the window and get our flu shots. So your story can be about anything. It can be about a person you met recently, or recent family get-together, which are few and far between in this pandemic. It can be about something that was unheard of to you, unthinkable to you a few years ago, but is routine now. I'll give you an example. My son, just the other day, was just musing, saying, I kind of wish I had, and I don't even remember what it was. He says, I kind of wish I had something. 2 days later, a package arrives, and there it is in the box. In the old days, you would have put something on your Christmas list, or maybe the next time you went to town, you would go shopping for the item. But, no, this is 2021. 2 days after I heard his musing, boom, it arrives, delivered. And of course, free shipping. Now you could talk about a childhood memory that maybe just popped into your head recently. Or maybe something you learned as a child that you were glad you did. Or in contrast, maybe something you learned as a child that you wish you didn't. Or a particular place you've been to or are at, which may give you some peace, or maybe causes apprehension. But all of those can evolve into a good story. And again, just 2, 3, 4 minutes to think about a story that you might want to share with the million people. We may not have a million people watching this when we're not the lead into the Super Bowl, but we have a wide audience, and you may want to share your few-minute story with that wide audience. And I'm giving you 4 or 5 weeks now to think of a good story. All right, now that was just the lead-in. What I wanted to talk to you about today is St. Brigid. If you don't know, last Sunday and Monday was St. Brigid's Day. That was February 1st and February 2nd. Now, why does St. Brigid's Day last 2 days, you might ask? Technically, it does not. St. Brigid's Day starts at the evening of Sunday, February 1st, and ends on the evening of February 2nd on Monday. So technically, it's a 24-hour day. And why then? Well, it kind of marks the beginning of spring, which seems odd to me because we just had a blizzard here in northern Michigan. But February 1st is about halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So it's as good a time as any to celebrate St. Brigid's Day. Now, I'm not Catholic, and that surprises a lot of people since I'm Irish and I have a thoroughly Celtic last name. But I was raised a Baptist, and my parents, in fact, were married at a Baptist church. Someday, maybe, I'll tell you the story why they are Baptists and not Catholics. But I grew up in a neighborhood in Detroit's West Side, where about half the community was Catholic and the other half was not. And so about half the kids, like me, went to the public school, and the other half went to the local parochial school. Now, the local parochial school was St. Robert's, and we used to call it St. Bob's. It's kind of funny, because during my entire childhood in that neighborhood, I never did learn what Bob did to become a saint. It must have been something special. I can't tell you what it was. Other than going to different schools, the kids were no different. We played with each other after school. We did all kinds of things together. We just went to different schools. And the only difference between the Catholic kids and the non-Catholic kids is the Catholic kids got more days off than the public school kids did. There was always a day off for Saint this day, and then there was another day off for Saint that day. And we didn't get any of the saints' days off in the public school. And in fact, I mean, of course, the public school couldn't celebrate them, but as a Baptist, we didn't believe in saints. And I'll be frank with you, as an adult, I don't believe much in any religion, but the saint thing just never made a lot of sense to me. But while, I can acknowledge personally that a saint is a saint, that doesn't mean that people who are called saints aren't great people, because they are. They must have done a lot of things right in their life to have people now call them saints. And once you're a saint for eternity. What greater honor can there be than that? Just think of all the cities that are named for saints. San Francisco, St. Louis, St. Paul, San Antonio, San Diego, St. Augustine. If I think about it, I'll probably think of 50 more. So you live forever in memory if you are a saint. Which brings me to St. Brigid. Brigid was from Kildare in Ireland. She lived in the 5th and 6th centuries, into the 6th century. Her mother was a Christian, and supposedly her mother was baptized by St. Patrick. Now her mother, Brigid's mother, was also a slave to a Celtic chief, and the Celtic chief was Brigid's father. All you need to know, I suppose. But when the chief found out that this woman was pregnant, he sold her to somebody else. Didn't want her or the baby to be around. Now later, when Brigid was a young girl, she did make it back into her father's household. But she never did earn her father's favor. And that was because she gave away everything that she had. She gave away everything that she could get a hold of. She always ran into somebody who was more needy than her. And she gave them whatever she could that might fulfill that need. Now, the father got quite fed up with this because she was giving away not only her stuff, she was giving away his stuff. And he finally took her to the King of Leinster. And on his way there, Brigid took her father, the chief's jeweled sword, probably the most valuable possession a Celtic chief could own. And Brigid gave that sword to a beggar so that he could pawn it off and use the money, a barter, to buy food for his family. Now, when the King of Leinster heard this story, he told Brigid's father that he had no choice but to release her from slavery, set her free. And he said, and the quote that goes down in history is, "Her merit before God is greater than ours." Now, as an adult, Brigid founded a monastery in Kildare called the Church of Oak. Now it's called the Kildare Cathedral. She founded a school of art. She always had a soft spot in her heart for the poor, and she spent her entire life giving things away to the poor. Certainly deserving of sainthood. Now, where is Brigid buried, you may ask? I asked that question. Here's what I found. She's buried in that monastery in Kildare. And initially, she was buried there. In the 9th century, they removed her body and moved it to Downpatrick, right next to the tombs of St. Patrick and St. Columba. And it wasn't moved there just to be with the other saints. Rather, the people in Kildare were worried about some Viking raids, frequent Viking raids, and they were afraid that the Vikings might desecrate the grave of St. Brigid. So as they moved her to Downpatrick. Is she still there? Most of her is. And by that I mean all of her is there except for her head. Where is her head, you may ask? The answer is, obviously, it's in Portugal. Now, the Crusaders of old liked to carry Christian relics with them when they went on their crusades. And some Crusaders from Ireland took the skull of St. Brigid with them, and they gave it as a gift to the King of Portugal. King of Portugal must have been a difficult guy or hard guy to find a gift for, so they gave her the head of St. Brigid. And it was carried into battle by Portuguese knights during the Crusades and brought back with them to Portugal. And then centuries later, was given by the then King of Portugal to the church. And it is now the head of St. Brigid, or at least most of it. There's more to the story. At least most of it is in Lisbon, in the vault of this church. Now the rest of the story. Supposedly some of her head, chunks of her skull, were taken later, centuries later, out of Portugal to Ireland. So some of Brigid's skull is in Dundalk convent in County Louth. And then some of her skull is in St. Brigid's Church in Dublin. So that's where she now lays. Some in Downpatrick, some in Lisbon, some in Dundalk, and some in Dublin. And you have to admit, the ancient people were kind of weird. Now, why is Brigid St. Brigid? Well, she's a particularly inspiring woman. I mean, her father arranged for her marriage to a married man, to a wealthy man, and she said, no, I want a life in the church. And she prayed to be turned ugly so that no man would want her. And of course, when she joined the convent, her beauty came back, and she became a wonderful-looking woman. And a lot of wonderful things happened to people who prayed to St. Brigid. And particularly true when it was a woman that was praying, because she's often thought of as the patron saint of women, certainly Irish women. And there are indeed three patron saints of Ireland: St. Patrick, St. Columba, and St. Brigid. So I'm going to ask one more intriguing question, because I'm running out of time here, and that is a simple one. Was St. Brigid a real person? The answer is maybe, maybe not. Because there was an ancient Celtic goddess named Brigid. And she was known as the goddess of healing and the goddess of childbirth. And Brigid was one of the better of the Celtic goddesses, because everybody loved Brigid. And the theory is that the early church sort of appropriated her. They made her one of their own. And indeed, instead of Brigid, the goddess, they told stories of Brigid the woman, who would someday be a saint. And that's the theory, anyway. And I am running out of time, so I did promise you I was going to get this done. I had one more story I was going to tell you, but I have something I have to do, which is to get you out of here in time for the Super Bowl, which starts actually in just a few minutes. They just started legal betting in Michigan. Legal sports betting, I should say. But I didn't place any bets. So I don't care who wins the game. I just want to enjoy the game. And I'm sure you do too. So I'm going to say goodbye for now so that you can enjoy the Super Bowl, whatever Roman numeral is now, and enjoy the fact that you have a little bit more information about St. Brigid. And I'll join you again next week when I do not have to compete with the Super Bowl. So goodbye for now.